The first hint of trouble arrived before dawn in the form of fresh tire imprints etched deep into my land. 15 minutes later, a contingent of homeowners association enforcers was poised to breach my fence as if they held dominion over the entire county. One of them, with a meticulously groomed hand, would place it on my shoulder and demand I yield. Little did they know out here in Texas, our approach to such matters bypasses the conventional emergency services. A single sound is all it takes. Click. The morning had begun in its customary fashion, a quiet so profound I could discern the settling of coffee in my mug. A soft gray light diffused across the acreage, slowly dislodging the last vestiges of night. The air carried the scent of cedar dust mingled with a faint metallic tang of recently discharged firearm lubricant. This was my preferred form of tranquility. I stepped onto the porch, the aged wood cool beneath my boots, and absorbed the scene. Cattle lowed in the distant fields. A gentle breeze barely rustled the mesquite. No engines, no voices, no extraneous disturbances. Just Texas, as it ought to be. I savored half my coffee, donned my worn leather gloves, and set off toward the western boundary. A few nights prior, a storm had felled a large branch, stretching the barbed wire taut like an ill-fitting belt. This was routine, the honest, quiet, and predictable work of ranching. However, midway through retensioning the wire, my gaze fell upon an anomaly in the soil that clearly did not belong. Tire tracks, recent ones, sliced a clean path across the hardpan near my southern gate. They were deep, wide, and smooth, not the mark of a ranch vehicle nor a neighbor's. This bore the signature of something sleek and costly, the kind of conveyance that residents of the new development take pride in polishing each Saturday morning. I proceeded slowly, my coffee still warm in my hand, my boots crunching on the parched earth. The gate's latch bore fresh scuff marks, disrupting the rust I had left undisturbed for 2 decades. Someone had attempted to open it, not by accident, not out of confusion, but out of a deliberate desire to probe my boundaries. I glanced up at the surveillance camera mounted above the T-post. Its red indicator light was blinking. It was recording. I accessed the application on my phone and initiated playback. Headlights illuminated the gate. A substantial, boxy black SUV glided in, just far enough to cross the property line. An individual disembarked, their footwear pristine, their stride measured, and they tested the latch as if appraising merchandise in a discount establishment. Subsequently, they reversed slowly, with an air of calm deliberation, as though planning a return visit. I replayed the segment a second time. Then, my attention shifted southward towards the burgeoning subdivision, Willow Ridge Preserve. Tan rooftops arranged like children's playthings. Homeowners Association regulations so stringent they could suffocate a mule. They had been subtly encroaching for months. Correspondence, offers, disingenuous pleasantries. I discarded every one of those missives. Now they were testing gates before the sun had fully risen. This was not mere curiosity. This was a clear manifestation of intent. I took another lingering sip of coffee, allowing the bitter notes to settle, and exhaled deliberately. Not fear, not even outright anger, but a familiar tension tightened in my chest. The kind that signals a boundary guarded by my family since 1948 is about to be transgressed. My father used to remark, "A man who inspects your gate before sunrise isn't checking the weather." I traversed the fence line once more, my steps firm, my eyes tracing the tracks leading back towards the road. Whoever left them had made no effort to conceal their presence. They intended for me to know they had been there. And individuals who believe HOA bylaws supersede Texas property lines invariably learn the truth when it is far too late. I finished my coffee, placed the mug on the porch railing, and surveyed my land, my father's land, my grandfather's land. The tracks were still fresh, and so was the intent of those who had made them. Trouble had arrived at my gate, and with the certainty of the rising sun, I knew it would return, seeking more. By mid-morning, the sun had climbed high enough to prickle the back of my neck, and the early quiet had yielded to the familiar hum of ranch activities. Cattle bellowed for their feed, blue jays squabbled in the oak grove behind the barn, and the steady rhythm of the windmill turned with the breeze. Nothing in the atmosphere hinted at the impending disruption, not until the distinct crunch of tires echoed up my extended driveway. Slow, deliberate, too refined for a ranch truck. I wiped my hands on my jeans, emerged from behind the barn, and beheld it. A silver Mercedes G-Wagon, impeccably clean, its windows so darkly tinted they concealed any secrets within. It ascended the incline as if the very ground belonged to it. No one familiar with me arrives in a vehicle of such ostentatious gleam. 3 individuals exited. 2 gentlemen clad in navy blazers, attire wholly inappropriate for proximity to barbed wire fences, and a woman whose heels were sharp enough to aerate soil. She moved with an air of entitlement, as though the earth itself should be grateful for her passage. Her identity was unnecessary. I recognized her kind. The embodiment of HOA royalty. "Mr. Drake," she announced, her smile as polished as the SUV behind her. "I am Karen Schilling, president of the Willow Ridge Preserve Homeowners Association. What a beautiful morning." I remained motionless, offering no acknowledgement, merely resting my thumbs on my belt and waiting. Karen emitted a light laugh, as if my stoicism were a charming jest. "We're not selling anything," she added, gesturing dismissively. "We're offering." Nothing auspicious ever follows such a declaration. She advanced, encroaching too closely, and swept her hand across my property as if unveiling a pre-purchased masterpiece. "I represent a group of investors and developers looking to expand our beautiful Willow Ridge community and your southern acreage." Her voice softened to a hushed reverence. "It's the missing piece." I allowed her words to linger in the oppressive heat before responding. "That missing piece, as I stated, has been in my family's possession since 1948. My father dug ponds on it with his bare hands. He worked it until his body failed. It is not a puzzle piece, madam. It is my home." Her smile remained unwavering, a painted facade. "And that is precisely why we are offering above market value." She nodded towards one of the blazer-clad men. He produced a leather portfolio from which he extracted a glossy map. "We are prepared to offer $1.6 million for the southern 400 acres. A clean cash transaction. All closing expenses will be covered." I emitted a soft chuckle, nudging a dust cloud with the toe of my boot. "Madam," I replied, "I wouldn't care if you offered me Fort Knox. This land is not for sale. Not today, not tomorrow." A subtle shift occurred behind her eyes, her mask faltering. The man with the portfolio stepped forward, tapping the map. "Mr. Drake, you should reconsider. We have already conducted preliminary surveys, access roads, topography, drainage." I froze. My gaze shifted from the map to his face. "Surveys?" I echoed, my voice dropping to a low growl. "Preliminary surveys." The man blinked, realizing his misstep. "Well, yes, just the initial ones." "That explains the tracks," I interrupted, my jaw tightening. "The tire marks at my south gate. Someone opened that latch before sunrise. That someone was you." A profound silence descended upon the pasture. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Karen interjected swiftly, her tone hardening. "Mr. Drake, this is progress. Families require housing. Our development is state-of-the-art, and frankly," she tilted her head, "we are going to build here eventually. We would simply prefer to do so with your cooperation." "Eventually," I countered, "implies I have a choice." Her smile vanished. "And my choice," I continued, "is for you to leave my property." Karen stared at me, the veneer of warmth completely gone. Her eyes were cold, calculating, predatory. "Think about it," she stated. "Take a few days. We will follow up." "I won't," I replied. "Save your fuel." She hesitated. Individuals of her disposition are unaccustomed to being dismissed by those they deem beneath them. Then she spun on her heel and marched back towards the Mercedes. The men followed like obedient automatons. They departed without another word, dust billowing behind them like the trail of a rattlesnake. I remained there until the last glint of silver vanished beyond the ridge. Then I retreated indoors, The cool interior of the house a welcome sensation against my skin. I unlocked the gun cabinet and retrieved the venerable Remington 870. I did not load it, merely operated the action. Rack back, rack forward, click. I repeated the sound softly. Their visit marked the end of polite discourse. Individuals like Karen do not accept rejection. They perceive it as an insult, and insults in their world necessitate a retort. Trouble had arrived today with a checkbook. Tomorrow, it would return with something far more formidable. I had entertained the faint hope that Karen's little procession might have been the extent of it. City dwellers in polished footwear arriving unannounced was not a novel occurrence. They typically departed, boasted to their acquaintances about their encounter with a genuine rancher, and then hastily retreated to whatever air-conditioned HOA meeting had spawned them. But this felt different. A palpable weight hung in the air, a subtle shift I could not quite articulate. 2 days of unnerving quiet. Too quiet. On the third morning, the stillness fractured. I was clearing mesquite brush near the lower pasture, allowing the chainsaw to gnaw through a trunk that had been leaning precariously since the last storm. When I silenced the engine, the sudden quiet amplified a faint sound behind me, sharp as a rifle crack. A delicate crunch, the sound of a boot on dry twigs, not my own. I spun around swiftly, my hand instinctively moving towards the belt knife I always carried. All I perceived were cedar shadows and dust motes dancing in the sunbeams. But then, something unnatural disrupted the landscape's organic palette. A sliver of brilliant orange, excessively vibrant, artificially so. I approached it. There, tethered to the branch of a young cedar, was a surveyor's ribbon, a garish orange plastic marker, audacious in its placement. It fluttered in the breeze as if it possessed an inherent right to be there. It was situated fully 20 feet inside my property line. I plucked it from the branch. The plastic crackled, as if protesting its removal. Then I spotted another and another. A trail of orange markers meandered along my southern fence line, as though someone had attempted to stitch a wound that did not exist. Karen's map. I followed them. My boots crunched on the ground, my jaw tightening. Whoever had placed these markers had not approached on foot. The ribbons were spaced at wide, even intervals, suggesting they had been deployed from a moving vehicle tossed out the window. Survey markers, placed with an air of confident entitlement. By the time I reached the rear gate, I already knew what I would discover. Fresh tire tracks, once more. This time, they were deeper. The kind that indicated someone reversing, pulling forward, aligning angles, taking measurements. Work driving, survey driving. The gate latch hung slightly ajar, not swung wide open, but nudged, tested. A wave of heat surged up my spine. Ribbons, trespass, unmarked vehicles, all occurring within 72 hours of Karen's pronouncement, "We are going to build here eventually." They were not merely planning, they were actively preparing. I tore down every ribbon, crushing them into a tight ball. By the time I had stuffed the last of them into my back pocket, it bulged as if concealing a deceased rattlesnake. I returned to the barn, deposited the plastic bundle onto the workbench, and stared at it. In the dim light, the neon orange appeared almost violent, incongruous against the aged steel and rough wood. A clear violation, plain and simple. I do not succumb to anger easily, never have. But disrespect strikes a different chord when it is directed at something for which I have shed blood. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, ascended the ridge with my thermos, and retrieved my drone controller. If they intended to engage in surveillance, two could participate. From my vantage point on the ridge, I launched the drone, sending it high, silently and steadily. The camera feed flickered onto my phone. Within 30 seconds, I saw the reality I had anticipated. A bulldozer path, recently cut, extending approximately 10 to 15 feet beyond my actual boundary, where the dense undergrowth obscured the fence, and just beyond that, a mobile soil sampling rig. 3 workers stood around it, clad in hard hats and vests, clipboards in hand, gesturing towards my trees, tapping the ground with a survey rod, discussing my soil as if it were already incorporated into their blueprints. Observing them, a profound and heavy sensation settled in my chest. The same clarity my father possessed just before a storm broke over the ridge. This was no longer a matter of testing. This was an aggressive push, a silent, calculated invasion, a message conveyed implicitly. We are already present. What action will you take? I lowered the drone, packed the controller, and gazed across my land. The line had not been metaphorically crossed. It was not a threat or a bluff. It had been breached by tire tracks, by plastic ribbons, by steel teeth, carving into earth that did not belong to them. And where I come from, that is the kind of transgression that ignites a conflict from which there is no retreat. By the following afternoon, the heat had intensified, the kind that clings to your shirt and makes the horizon shimmer like water. I had spent the morning mending a waterline near the cattle pens, attempting to persuade myself that the ribbons and the drilling rig were merely overzealous subcontractors working ahead of schedule. But deep down, I knew better. People do not trespass by accident in Texas, not with heavy equipment, and certainly not on two separate occasions. Around 4:30, I patrolled the southern boundary once more. Habit, instinct, perhaps even a foolish sliver of hope that the ribbons would not reappear. I saw no new markers. This should have brought me a measure of peace. It did not. Half a mile from the house, I reached the corner of the fence where the cedar stand grows thickest. It is darker there. Shadows layer deeply, and the heat lessens just enough to feel like stepping into an alternate reality. And then I heard it. Not a crunch, not the snap of a twig, but a click. Soft, electronic, like the half-depressed shutter of a camera. I froze. Cattle do not produce such a sound. The wind most certainly does not. Someone was concealed within my trees. My hand drifted towards my sidearm. The old Ruger 357 I carry for snakes and the occasional audacious coyote. I did not unholster it. I did not even brush against its grip. I merely let my hand hang heavy, steady. I took one slow step towards the tree line. That is when I saw it. A glint of glass nestled behind the cedar needles. A lens, a long telephoto lens. And it was not directed at the ground, or the soil, or the trees. It was pointed directly at me. I adjusted my stance, narrowing my eyes. A man crouched low behind the brush, wearing a khaki vest with a cheap logo patch, sweat darkening his collar. He held the DSLR with the practiced grip of someone who had awaited a specific shot for a considerable duration. Beside him, another man crouched with a clipboard, scribbling with such haste that the paper trembled. My mind raced. Why film me? If this were a genuine environmental survey, they would be documenting soil erosion or vegetation types. But the lens remained fixed on my chest, patiently waiting. And then it struck me. They were not seeking data. They were seeking a reaction. They desired footage of an agitated rancher yelling, brandishing a firearm, threatening innocent workers. They were deliberately baiting a trap. I conceded them no ground. I did not raise my voice, nor did I even glance at my holster. I spoke calmly, the kind of calm that prompts grown men to reevaluate their life choices. Are you gentlemen lost? The cameraman flinched so violently the cedar branch shook. The clipboard man appeared to cease breathing for a moment. We were conducting an environmental assessment, the cameraman stammered, authorized by the Willow Ridge Preserve Development Committee. I nodded, my expression impassive. An environmental assessment, I repeated. Inside my fence without permission, with your camera pointed at my face. The clipboard man stepped forward, attempting to assert his authority. Sir, the HOA bylaws stipulate. I cut him off by stepping closer, allowing my shadow to fall upon both men. The HOA, I stated, my voice unwavering, has no jurisdiction beyond its diminutive toy-like neighborhood, and certainly not on my family's land. Did you procure a surveyor's permit, county authorization, property owner consent? Silence. I thought not. The cameraman swallowed hard. He glanced at his companion as if realizing the footage they had hoped for was not forthcoming. Sir, we do not seek trouble, he muttered. I offered him a thin smile. The kind that reassures honest men and causes guilty ones to sweat profusely. Trouble? If I sought trouble, I would have unholstered my firearm 30 seconds ago. You are fortunate I am a patient man. And now who dispatched you?" The clipboard man faltered. He stared at the ground and whispered, "Karen." There it was. Confirmation. I gestured towards the southern gate with 2 fingers. "Walk. Do not jog. Do not run. And keep that lens cap secured. If I find either of you within these trees again, this conversation will take a very different turn." They moved with haste. Not a full run, but close enough to be undignified. I watched their silhouettes diminish against the late afternoon sun, dust puffing up around their expensive hiking boots. When they finally disappeared, the cedar stand fell silent once more. Too quiet. This was not business. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a case of confusion. Karen had not dispatched laborers. She had sent scouts, spies. Her objective was to map the land and to map me. She aimed to ascertain if she could provoke a misstep, something she could twist into a legal filing. I stood alone in the cedar shade, listening to the wind whisper through the needles. They wished to see a monster. I had no intention of providing them with one. I intended to deliver a nightmare. The following morning commenced with a deceptive quiet. Too quiet for the events that were about to unfold. I was transporting salt blocks to the northern pasture when I observed the mail truck slowly navigating my driveway. It was the same driver I had known for years, a decent man, typically cheerful, but today he avoided my gaze. He alighted from the vehicle, holding a stack of envelopes secured by a rubber band. Prominent red stamps across the top declared certified mail. Return receipt required. He cleared his throat. "Morning, Drake. You, might want to sign for these." I accepted them, and their weight alone signaled that this was no ordinary postal delivery. Inside the barn, I severed the rubber band and spread the envelopes across my workbench. Each bore the same header: Willow Ridge Preserve, Homeowners Association, Compliance and Enforcement Division. My jaw tightened. I opened the first envelope. Noise violations at 2 a.m. I had been sound asleep at 2 a.m. Second envelope. Environmental contamination report citing improper livestock waste management. I scoffed. My cattle are cleaner than most HOA backyards. Third envelope. Unauthorized burning activity. They had included a blurry photograph, clearly taken from the subdivision, showing sunlight reflecting off my burn barrel lid. Not smoke, merely glare. The accusations continued to mount. 11 letters, all fabrications. And then the final envelope. This one was noticeably thicker. Inside lay a glossy, color-printed map titled Willow Ridge Expansion Phase 2. My stomach plummeted. Half of my southern acreage, nearly 200 acres, was shaded green and designated as Preserve Community Green Belt. The HOA had effectively superimposed their management over my land, my family's land, as if it had already been acquired. I laid the map down slowly, treating it as if it were a venomous entity. Then I reached for my phone. Avery Collins answered on the second ring. He has served as my attorney since my father's passing. A man of quiet demeanor and sharp intellect, he never wastes a word. If most lawyers are pocket knives, Avery is a straight razor. "Avery," I said, "you need to see what Karen just sent me." I detailed the assortment of accusations, followed by the map. He listened without interruption, without sighs, without visible reaction, until I concluded. Then his voice deepened perceptibly. "That map is not an oversight, Drake. It is intent." "Intent for what?" "For seizure," he stated flatly. "This is how fraudulent annexations begin. Paper trails first, subsequent actions second. Keep that map secure. It is your silver bullet." I swallowed hard. I anticipated she was bold, but she is testing the limits of how far she can push without a reciprocal response. Avery advised, "Whatever you do not confront them tonight. Allow them to make the initial misstep." But deep down, I already understood. Karen was not going to wait for any further developments. Not any longer. The sun dipped below the ridge with unusual swiftness that evening, as if reluctant to bear witness to the unfolding events. Dinner tasted like cardboard, beans, cornbread, brisket. None of it provided sustenance. My mind continually circled the same queries. If Karen is willing to falsify a map, if she dispatches scouts to film me, if she is constructing a legal case, then what will be her subsequent maneuver? The house felt unsettling that night. Some nights are dark, some nights are empty. This particular night, it felt as though it were observing me. I moved through the house deliberately, checking the locks. Not out of fear. Men raised on ranches are not easily intimidated, but out of ingrained instinct, the same instinct my father trusted implicitly above weather forecasts. Front door, back door, windows, barn latch, all secure. Still, a sense of unease persisted. In the living room, the dogs began to pace. Their quiet paws moved rhythmically across the hardwood floor. Two border collies, older but possessing a sharpness that surpassed most people I know. They exhibited no fear, only an intense alertness. Too alert. I stepped onto the veranda, allowing the mesh door to close softly behind me. The evening air was heavy and humid. The ceaseless chirping of cicadas had abruptly ceased. Both canines were focused southward, directly towards the tree line of cedars. "Easy there," I uttered softly, yet they remained immobile, their gazes fixed. I followed their line of sight. Nothing stirred. Then a faint glimmer, fleeting, akin to sunlight reflecting off polished glass. Not a lightning strike, nor a firefly, but something reflective, perhaps a lens, a camera, or binoculars, aimed in my direction. My jaw tightened. Not again. Not tonight. I descended the porch steps and entered the yard. The ground beneath my boots still radiated the day's warmth, soft and familiar, but an underlying chill permeated the air. The collies remained on the porch, low rumblings vibrating within their chests. For a considerable duration, I remained still, listening. Initially, silence, then a subtle hum. Low, mechanical, reminiscent of an engine at idle in the distance. Perhaps construction machinery or staging equipment. In the darkness, their concealment was no longer a priority. I retreated indoors, prepared another coffee, and settled at the kitchen table, affording me a view through the window facing south. I refrained from activating the lights, maintaining absolute quiet, merely sitting in the gloom, observing, contemplating, anticipating. The collie eventually settled beside me, every fiber of its being taut with readiness. Avery's counsel echoed in my thoughts, allow them to make the initial misstep. The reality, however, was stark. An individual who disregards the boundary of your property will inevitably disrespect your land. Disregard for your land translates to disregard for your dwelling. Once the sanctity of one's home is breached, the next logical step is a violation of the entrance. Outside, the night seemed to hold its breath. The prior incident involving paperwork had served as their preliminary warning. Whatever transpired next would not be a paper affair. It would arrive with the glare of headlights, the crunch of boots, and an unsettling arrogance. Midnight was approaching, and I would be prepared. Sleep eluded me that night. Truly, it did not. I simply remained there, attuned to the breathing of the darkness. No headlights pierced the night, no engines roared, not even the distant cry of a coyote, only a profound stillness, the kind that signals an impending escalation. And it arrived. At precisely 7:15 the following morning, the quiet was shattered. I stood on the porch, nursing my third cup of coffee, observing the vapor ascend from the mug when I observed them. This time, there was no attempt at stealth, no gradual approach along the perimeter, no probing of gates or concealment behind the cedars. Instead, they advanced as if they owned the very ground. 3 immaculate white SUVs, devoid of markings, their surfaces so polished they could serve as mirrors. They bypassed the gate entirely, driving directly onto my pasture, utilizing the opening intended for the hay delivery vehicle. They positioned themselves in an exact formation. Simultaneously, the doors swung open. It bore the semblance of a government operation. Where the government comprised of middle-aged office dwellers with unfulfilled gym memberships, 6 men emerged. Lacking their usual blazers, they sported high-visibility vests, brilliant yellow and orange hues that seemed incongruous in a rural setting, artificial hornets invading a natural habitat. They commenced unloading equipment without delay: tripods, laser levels, and surveying stakes tipped with crimson. Their intent was not merely to survey, it was to claim. I placed my coffee mug on the railing. The porcelain made a sharp, distinct clink. Then I began to walk, not with haste, nor aggression, but with a measured stride. My boots crunched on the gravel. The sun warmed the back of my neck. I was attired in my customary outfit, a faded denim shirt with sleeves rolled up, jeans bearing the marks of oil and dust, and boots that predated their entire development. As I drew nearer, I identified the apparent leader, a man of considerable height and girth, clutching a clipboard as though it were an emblem of authority. Upon seeing me, he offered a dismissive smirk. "Sir," he stated, without lifting his gaze, "you will need to maintain your distance. This is an active survey zone." A low, dry chuckle escaped my lips. An active survey zone, indeed, a euphemism for trespassing. This elicited a reaction, drawing his eyes away from the clipboard. "We are executing a preliminary partition in accordance with Willow Ridge, Phase 2. We possess the necessary authorization, correct?" He tapped the document as if it were sacred text. "I am unconcerned with whatever you hold on that clipboard," I declared. "Unless it is a warrant or a deed bearing my signature, you are standing on private property." I advanced a single step. "Pack it up." The workers paused, their gazes shifting to their supervisor. He emitted a sigh, the exasperated sound of a man convinced he is dealing with someone intellectually inferior. "Sir, should you continue to obstruct authorized personnel, we will document this as non-compliance. Now step aside." And then he committed his error. He moved closer and placed a hand on my shoulder. A gentle touch, yet imbued with arrogance, dismissal, and condescension, as though he were guiding a disoriented elderly gentleman out of the way in a hardware store. I did not recoil from his touch, nor did I utter a curse or shove him. I simply observed his meticulously manicured fingers resting on my shirt, then met his gaze. For 2 protracted seconds, 1, then 2, I witnessed his confidence dissolve, akin to water draining from a ruptured canteen. He snatched his hand back. "Do not," I stated calmly. I then turned my back on him, ascended the porch steps, and entered the cool interior of the house, making my way directly to the gun cabinet. I unlocked it. Without haste, without tremor, but with a clear sense of purpose. I reached past the rifles and retrieved the Remington 80-70 Express, a 12-gauge firearm with a walnut stock, its steel worn from years of reliable service. I gathered a handful of shells, their metallic clinking in my pocket, a sound that men like him would not soon forget. I then returned outside. The sun glinted off the barrel, and instantly every individual in the field snapped their heads in my direction. The leader froze mid-sentence. Workers ceased hammering stakes. A tool was dropped, landing with a thud in the dirt. A profound silence descended upon the pasture, heavy and charged with electricity. I advanced until I was 20 yards distant. I did not aim the shotgun directly at them. I held it angled safely towards the sky, resting comfortably in my hands, but my gaze was fixed upon the leader. Then I gripped the forend, pulled it back, and slammed it forward. Metal against metal, a sharp, clean, decisive sound. The report reverberated across the field like distant thunder. The leader's face contorted, draining of color as if dusted with drywall powder. One worker dropped his laser level. Another stumbled backward, falling hard. Hands shot into the air. Sir, whoa, 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 I said, my voice measured. You stated this was a survey zone. I paused. I am informing you that it is a target range. This was the decisive moment. Panic erupted. The leader shrieked, "Pack up! Move! Move!" They scrambled, tripping and stumbling, abandoning their equipment as if fleeing a wildfire. Doors slammed, engines roared, tires spewed gravel like a barrage of machine gun fire. One SUV executed such a violent fishtail that it nearly clipped my fence post. Within 45 seconds, the field was devoid of their presence. Only a swirling cloud of dust, a fractured tripod, and a clipboard lying face down in the dirt remained. I stood there, the Remington resting easily in my grasp. I then ejected the single shell I had chambered, catching it cleanly, and slipped it into my pocket. Surveying the empty pasture, I remarked. I informed him, "This is Texas. We do not resort to dialing 911 out here." I understood that the tranquility would be fleeting, not after their desperate retreat. Individuals like Karen do not concede defeat. They regroup and rearm. I had barely finished breaking open the Remington, palming the unfired shell, when the first siren pierced the morning air. Faint at first, then growing in intensity, rattling the porch windows. 22 minutes. That was their response time. 2 county patrol cars crested the ridge, their emergency lights flashing across the pasture, dust kicking up in their wake. They did not hesitate, nor did they idle. They proceeded directly to the main gate, as if arriving at an active crime scene. I did not approach them. I remained on the porch, my hands visible, a coffee cup in my left hand, my right thumb casually hooked into my belt loop. I understood the dynamics of such situations. A significant portion of the peril lies not in the weapon one carries, but in the narrative already established about you before law enforcement arrives. 2 deputies emerged. One, a young officer, his hand already hovering over his holster, and behind him, Mark Renier, a good man. His eyes betrayed a weariness, a lifetime of experience that enabled him to discern when something was amiss. He halted 10 feet away. "Morning, Tom." "Morning, Mark," I greeted. "We received a call," he stated. "Distance, weapon involved. The caller alleges you brandished a shotgun at a survey crew. Claims you aimed it at them. States they feared for their lives." I took a sip of my coffee. "I did not aim at anyone. Mark, you know that." The rookie shifted, chambered around, and blurted out, his voice still tinged with youthful apprehension. Mark raised a hand to silence him. I inclined my chin towards the pasture. "They were trespassing. Ignored warnings." I racked the slide to emphasize my point. The barrel never lowered, never leveled. I am not foolish. Mark rubbed his hand down his face. "Tom, the woman who called this in, Karen Schilling, she's incensed. Says you're unstable. Says you threatened to kill them. She is fabricating these claims," I stated plainly. "Whether she is or isn't is immaterial. I must take a report, and if I find probable cause, then—" I began to reach slowly into my pocket. "I have this." The rookie tensed, his grip tightening on his firearm. "Easy," I cautioned. "USB drive. Porch camera." I tossed it to Mark, who caught it one-handed. High-definition audio captured the entire incident. It shows them trespassing. It shows them disregarding my warning. It shows my muzzle pointed at the clouds throughout the entire exchange. Mark weighed the drive in his palm, as if it were an unexpected boon. "I will review it in the cruiser," he stated quietly. "If it is as you say, then you are clear." He turned to depart but paused, looking back once more. "Dom, try not to provoke the hornet's nest again today." I offered no response. It was unnecessary. 15 minutes later, the patrol cars departed. No handcuffs, no escort, no record of arrest. A sense of relief should have washed over me, but my gut remained constricted, seized by an unease I typically experienced just before a severe storm. My intuition proved correct. At noon, my phone began to buzz. 1 notification, then 5, then 40. Facebook groups, neighborhood threads, local community alert pages. I opened one, a decision I immediately regretted. There I was, frozen in a grainy image, magnified by the shaky hand of someone inside one of the fleeing SUVs. The shotgun in my hand, dust swirling around me, my face etched with the intensity of adrenaline. The caption, emblazoned across the screen in bold red letters, read, "Armed and dangerous. Local rancher threatens community volunteers." My jaw clenched so tightly it ached. The post continued. "This morning, a peaceful crew performing community planning duties was ambushed by Thomas Drake, who brandished a loaded weapon and issued verbal threats. Please avoid the southern boundary. The sheriff is investigating. Stay safe." The comments flooded in rapidly. "He should be arrested. My children ride bikes near there. This man is clearly unstable. Flag him immediately. Why does he even possess a firearm? They knew nothing of me. They were unfamiliar with this land. All they possessed was the fabricated narrative provided by Karen. Then, a message that sent a chill through me. Should the county review the mental stability of rural landowners near residential zones? Safer Communities Project. It was not a question, but a venomous dart aimed directly at my throat. A strategy of public denigration, social condemnation, to corner me until the county felt ethically justified in seizing my property. My phone rang. Avery. "Tom, do not check social media," he instructed. "Too late. Do not respond. Do not post. Do not even like a comment. They are trying to provoke you. They want a record of you losing your temper." "They are labeling me a menace," I stated softly. "You prevailed legally this morning, so now they are attempting to defeat you in the public arena." He hesitated. "Tom, this has escalated beyond a property dispute. They are constructing a narrative that you cannot overcome through force." I ended the call and stepped outside. The sun shone brightly, yet the ranch felt overshadowed by something cold and artificial. I looked towards the ridge. A vehicle was parked on the public road, not a survey truck, not an HOA representative, but a news van. A person stood beside it, a shoulder-mounted camera, filming my property as if documenting a crime scene. The invasion was no longer physical. It was not about stakes or drilling rigs. It was about a story. They were not merely attempting to seize my land. They aimed to demolish my reputation, shatter my credibility, and portray me as a villain so they could step in as saviors. And for the first time since this ordeal began, a sharp, painful realization dawned. My shotgun offered no solution now. I required a different kind of armament, one comprised of documentation, precision, and legal teeth, the kind wielded by attorneys. The news van remained on the ridge for 20 minutes, ample time to capture everything that was not a transgression and twist it into something that appeared to be. I offered no wave, no shout, no gesture to provide them with the spectacle they desired. I simply stood on the porch, like a man observing an approaching storm front. They sought drama. I presented them with a tableau. When the van finally departed, kicking up dust in its wake, I returned inside. The house felt unnervingly silent. That profound stillness, the kind that descends immediately after an attempt to rewrite one's life story on the internet. My phone vibrated. Avery. I answered on the first ring. "Tom," he said, his tone concise and businesslike, "get to my office immediately and park in the alley. Ensure no one sees your truck." I needed no further urging. I navigated the winding route into town, passing the feed store, the steel fabrication yard, places indifferent to the pronouncements of Facebook. Avery Collins' office was situated above a modest, somewhat dilapidated insurance agency on Main Street. 2 rooms, a struggling potted plant, and a lawyer sharp enough to slice through steel. He awaited me at the rear entrance, holding it open as if we were weathering a tempest. Once inside, he secured the door behind us. "You are being targeted," Avery stated without preamble, "and not by amateurs. This is no longer a land dispute. It is a calculated maneuver designed to facilitate an emergency seizure." "In layman's terms, Avery," I requested. "They are painting you as unstable," he explained. "The county will deem the land unsafe, and they will seize it. Eminent domain through reputational damage." I exhaled slowly. "So, what is the next step?" Avery did not respond directly. Instead, he gestured towards a corner of the office. Seated in the client chair, partially obscured by the blinds, was a man with his hands clasped tightly in his lap, younger than me, perhaps in his early 40s, wearing an expensive polo shirt with visible sweat stains at the collar. His leg jiggled with an almost independent rhythm. I recognized him. "Ethan," I identified. Ethan Brooks looked up, his face pale, his eyes rimmed with red, suggesting a prolonged period without sleep. "Mr. Drake," he murmured. I glanced at Avery. "What is he doing here?" "He is defecting," Avery confirmed. "Show him, Ethan." Ethan swallowed hard and produced a small silver USB drive from his pocket. His hand trembled as he placed it on the desk. "Karen terminated my employment this morning," he stated, his voice unsteady. She claimed the survey debacle was my fault, said I hired the wrong team, that I failed to secure the perimeter. He emitted a strained, bitter laugh. She is setting me up to take the blame if the county begins to investigate, just as she did to the contractor last year. I eyed the USB drive. What is on it? Ethan took a deep breath. Everything. Avery plugged the drive into his laptop, his jaw tightening. He angled the screen so I could see. This was not the map they had sent me. This one was significantly clearer, sharper. It bore a developer's logo in the corner, Cypress Ridge Capital, and a date 3 weeks prior to Karen's initial arrival on my property. Avery whispered, "Oh, hell." Ethan leaned forward, his voice faltering. "Examine the zoning. Observe the blocks. My southern 400 acres were not designated as public parkland in green. They were depicted in blue, marked as residential blocks 4A through 4F. Sold, pre-sold. They had already sold lots on my land." Karen assured them it was a done deal. Ethan continued. "She informed the developer that your signature was forthcoming any day." He wiped his palms on his khakis. "She accepted the deposit. She has already expensed the commission. Pool renovations, travel expenses, personal reimbursements." Avery closed his eyes and exhaled through his nose, like a predator sensing its prey. "That," he stated slowly, "is fraud. It is conspiracy. And given that they utilized the Postal Service to deliver that falsified map to you yesterday, it constitutes potential federal mail fraud." For a moment, the room became utterly still, lifeless still. I was not contending with a neighborhood dispute. I was confronting criminals. "So," I inquired softly, "what course of action do we pursue now?" Avery straightened. "We shift to the offensive. First thing tomorrow morning, we will file a counterclaim. Harassment, trespass, title fraud, property interference." He tapped the laptop. "And with Ethan's testimony," he added, "we have a whistleblower." Ethan appeared distressed. He wrung his hands together. "She will utterly destroy me," he whispered. "Karen, she will tarnish my name. My family resides in Willow Ridge. She will ensure no one speaks to me again." I stepped forward. He was trembling, not from cowardice but from fear, the kind that stems from prolonged subjugation. I extended my hand. "She will attempt to do so," I said quietly, "but she will have to confront me first." Ethan gazed at my outstretched hand for a prolonged moment, then grasped it. His grip was weak, but genuine. Avery closed the laptop with a soft click. "Tom, there is one more matter. The news van coverage is escalating. National outlets are picking it up. Texas rancher threatens survey crew. It will be ubiquitous by morning." I shrugged. "Let them run with it." Avery frowned. "You are that confident?" I glanced down at the map, my land colored blue as if already irrevocably divided. "No," I replied. "I'm not confident. I'm certain." Avery nodded in a manner that signals the inevitability of conflict. "Return home," he advised. "Secure your gates. Refrain from speaking with anyone. Allow them to believe they are prevailing for one more night." I stepped out into the alley. The sun was descending, painting the sky in hues of purple and red, the color of a spreading bruise. Karen believed she had me cornered. She assumed she was dealing with a frightened rancher and a fabricated map. What she failed to comprehend was that I now possessed the single element that eradicates a falsehood more swiftly than a bullet, the truth. And on Friday, I intended to pull the trigger. I drove home from Avery's office, the windows lowered just enough to allow the cool night air to circulate. The sky above my property was transforming into the color of old bruises, a deep, slow-moving purple. Tonight was not peaceful. Tonight felt like the pregnant pause between a flash of lightning and the impending thunder. I parked beside the barn, silenced the engine, and stood there for a moment, allowing my eyes to adjust, my heartbeat to steady. One day remained until the hearing. One day until truth confronted falsehood in the hallowed halls of justice. I fed the cattle, secured the gates, and patrolled the perimeter with a flashlight. Each step felt like traversing a warning etched across the very earth. As I re-entered the house, my phone vibrated. An unknown number. I nearly let it go to voicemail until I heard the message. A woman's voice. Calm. Controlled. Mr. Drake, my name is Linda Rowan. I am an independent investigative reporter. I do not subscribe to the HOA's narrative. Something is amiss. I wish to hear your perspective. Please call me back. Most reporters sought out victims. She sounded like someone in pursuit of truth. I returned her call. She answered instantaneously. Mr. Drake, this is she, I responded. I am not recording this conversation. You are not a soundbite. I have covered HOA corruption for years, and what they are doing to you is textbook character assassination. She had my undivided attention. What do you require from me? Proof, she stated. Something tangible. Something I can publish before the major networks finalize their morning broadcasts. I nodded, though she could not witness the gesture. Meet me at the south gate in 15 minutes. She arrived early, a silver sedan trailing a plume of dust in the moonlight. Linda emerged, dressed in jeans and boots, her hair tied back. Not glamorous, not theatrical, but a worker, much like myself. She shook my hand firmly. Let's see what they are attempting to conceal. I guided her through the pasture, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, the abandoned survey stakes, the discarded ribbons, the distinct tire tracks. She knelt beside one of the stakes. These were not planted for measurement, she murmured. They were placed for effect. I then led her to the barn, where I presented the footage, including the drone recordings. She watched every frame, leaning forward, her breathing shallow. When the video concluded, she leaned back. Oh my God, she whispered, as if uttering a prayer. This is not a land dispute, Mr. Drake. This is a staged, hostile takeover. Yes, I replied softly. I had surmised as much. She captured images, duplicated data, and recorded observations with surgical exactitude. Then she delivered the verdict. This narrative breaks tonight. A spark ignited within me, a small yet tangible ember of hope. I escorted her back towards her vehicle. That's precisely when my phone chirped once more. Ethan. His voice was so strained I could barely discern it. Tom, it's me. You have to. A jarring noise erupted behind him, like something collapsing, followed by a stifled cry. Tom, they've arrived. Who's there? I demanded. Another crash resounded. Then Karen sent them. I'm unsure who. He stammered. They're battering down my door, claiming I pilfered HOA property. Tom, please. The connection dissolved, leaving an unnerving silence. Linda observed the shift in my demeanor. What transpired? I snatched my keys. They located Ethan. Her gaze sharpened instantly. Get in, I'm driving. We sped down the county lane in her sedan, a trail of kicked-up dust billowing behind us like smoke. Ethan resided in a modest rental duplex situated behind a service station, the sort of inconspicuous dwelling one overlooks until something is amiss. And indeed, something was profoundly wrong. As we navigated the street, I observed two men departing Ethan's front entrance. Burly individuals, clad in construction vests, carrying flashlights and clipboards, yet of a menacing design. Hard metal, suitable for concealing firearms or instruments of coercion. Linda decelerated the vehicle to avoid attracting undue notice. Are those Karen's operatives? She inquired in a hushed tone. 100%, I confirmed. The men ascended into a dark SUV and departed, their headlights conspicuously absent. Linda parked 3 residences away. We sprinted to Ethan's doorway. It was ajar, not forced, but partially opened as a terrified individual might do when seeking succor. Ethan, I called out softly. No response. I nudged the door the remainder of the way open with my fingertips. He was on the floor, slumped against the wall, trembling so violently that the lamp beside him vibrated. Tom, he whispered. They warned me that if I spoke out, if I testified, they would destroy me. They threatened to accuse me of forgery. They vowed to claim I embezzled funds. They declared they would summon the authorities and label me a menace. I knelt beside him. Where is your family, Ethan? His breath hitched. Thank goodness. I dispatched the children to their grandmothers this morning, he stated, his voice cracking. I had a premonition. I couldn't articulate what it was, but I simply didn't wish them in the house today. He pressed both hands to his face. I presumed they would only target me. I never anticipated they would appear at my doorstep. Linda stepped closer, her voice gentle yet firm. Ethan, she said, you are the pivotal witness. They are attempting to intimidate you into silence. He swallowed with difficulty. She knows I disseminated the files. Linda placed a hand on his shoulder. Then you've made the appropriate adversaries? This finally galvanized him to stand, unsteady but upright. We retrieved his laptop, a duffel bag, and a crate of paperwork. Then we exited through the rear entrance and entered Linda's vehicle. Ethan gazed out the window as we departed, his chest heaving with shallow, panicked breaths. He was not a combatant, not equipped for such a confrontation, yet he possessed the courage to articulate the truth. Not many men can claim such bravery. We arrived at my ranch close to midnight. I opened the gate. Linda drove through, and I secured it behind us, employing a double chain and a reinforced bar. Ethan alighted from the car and surveyed my property as though it were the first sanctuary he had encountered in years. You will reside in the guest quarters, I informed him. No debate. He nodded mutely. Linda joined me. This extends beyond your property, Tom, she stated quietly. If Karen is dispatching individuals to threaten a whistleblower, that transcends HOA politics. It constitutes organized coercion. I am not seeking notoriety, I replied. You won't achieve fame, she countered. You are about to command attention, and Karen is on the verge of unraveling beneath it. I surveyed my land, the same soil my father trod, the same fence line my grandfather meticulously secured with his own hands. Tomorrow, the world would awaken to the truth. Linda would publish. Ethan would testify. Avery would litigate. And Karen would finally exhaust her avenues of escape. Linda turned to me, her voice low. Rest, Tom. Tomorrow the tide will turn. But sleep eluded me. I patrolled the fence line until dawn, safeguarding the land I'd pledged to defend, and somewhere behind me, in my guest room, Ethan finally found repose after days of turmoil. Because tonight, for the first time, he was not fleeing. Friday morning felt as though the entire county held its collective breath, poised to cast the deciding vote. A guilty monster or a man protecting his own. I parked behind the courthouse as Avery had instructed. Linda was already present, her hair neatly tied back, camera bag slung over one shoulder. Ethan stood beside her, his shoulders hunched, clutching his duffel as if prepared for flight. Avery opened the door. Everyone prepared? Ethan whispered. No, I responded. Yes, Avery grinned. A commendable equipoise. The courtroom resembled a structure hewn from the very essence of Texas itself, with oak benches, cedar walls, and motes of dust dancing through shafts of morning sunlight. And at its heart presided Judge Raleigh McClure, a gentleman in his early 70s, sporting a silver mustache and boots beneath his robes, exuding an air of profound intolerance for imbeciles. Karen occupied the opposing side, her posture ramrod straight, enveloped in a blazer that undoubtedly surpassed the value of my truck. Her legal counsel flanked her like a flock of iridescent crows. The bailiff announced the proceedings. Karen's attorney advanced with an air of swagger, his polished shoes clicking with exaggerated loudness upon the venerable wooden floor. Your Honor, he began, the defendant. Judge McClure raised a single finger. Son, from what county do you hail? Houston, Your Honor. That explains the cologne. Perhaps attempt to converse like a sentient being rather than reciting a press release. Snickers rippled through the assembled onlookers. Karen's lawyer swallowed and recommenced, launching into a series of accusations so theatrical they might have been lifted from a daytime soap opera. Armed threat, erratic conduct, malevolent intent. Then, Avery rose. The room seemed to gravitate towards him, much like Flora seeking sunlight. Your Honor, Avery stated, his demeanor as placid as a clergyman's, we possess evidence. Excellent, Judge McClure declared. I appreciate evidence. It expedites the elimination of superfluous rhetoric. The courtroom erupted in a more robust round of laughter. Avery dimmed the lights and presented the footage from the porch. I was depicted standing calmly, my firearm held aloft. 5 individuals in neon vests scattered like startled pigeons. The judge tapped the bench with a knuckle. Well now, that shotgun isn't aimed at any soul on God's green earth. It appears to me to be a gentleman enjoying his morning. He then turned his attention to Karen's table. You folks certainly possess vivid imaginations. Subsequently, Avery produced the map. Not the spurious document mailed to me, but the genuine article from Cypress Ridge Capital, meticulously detailing my land already subdivided, numbered, and priced. The judge scrutinized it as if it emanated an offensive odor. Ms. Schilling, he commented, falsifying a land plat is the sort of incompetence that typically incinerates an entire neighborhood before breakfast. Karen stiffened. Avery was far from finished. Your Honor, there is more. Subsequent to Mr. Brooks' attempt to come forward, his residence was vandalized, windows shattered, stones hurled at his door, and threatening missives. Avery directed his gaze squarely at Karen. This constitutes witness intimidation. A murmur swept through the crowd. Judge McClure slowly turned to Karen. Ma'am, in this courtroom, we accord witnesses the utmost respect. You treat them as targets, and shortly thereafter, you will be sharing accommodations with individuals who possess a particular disdain for bullies. Karen's attorney attempted an objection, but the judge silenced him with a mere glance. Avery called Ethan to the stand. The unfortunate man trembled so violently he could barely grasp the Bible, yet he recounted, with unwavering honesty, the details of the fabricated maps, the pre-sold parcels, the funds Karen had already dispersed, the directives she had issued, and the subsequent threats. Upon its conclusion, Judge McClure leaned forward, his elbows resting on the bench. Miss Schilling, he stated softly, his quiet tone more impactful than any raised voice, every single accusation you have leveled against this man is an unmitigated fabrication. Bang! The gavel struck. The case was dismissed. A complete and utter dismissal with prejudice, and your actions are hereby referred to the district attorney. Fraud, harassment, attempted title theft, witness intimidation. Let them untangle the remainder. Karen's countenance did not merely falter, it utterly disintegrated. Her legal team remained frozen, like inanimate figures. Court adjourned, Judge McClure announced. And ma'am, should you or any of your HOA ruffians set foot upon Mr. Drake's property again, I assure you, you will gain a profound understanding of the purpose for which trespass laws were enacted. Bang. Case closed. We emerged into a barrage of microphones. Linda recorded everything, her movements steady, respectful, and sharp. I uttered a mere 5 words. Truth prevails, eventually, always. Then, I walked past the cameras, descended the courthouse steps, and stepped into the liberating sunlight of a free man. The journey home felt considerably lighter than it had in weeks. As my ranch finally came into view, its fences straight, its grass catching the amber glow of the late afternoon, a knot within me loosened. I parked beside the old wooden gate, the same gateway through which Karen's hired hands had passed, the same gateway I had painstakingly rebuilt on 2 occasions, the same gateway that stood as an unwavering demarcation in the earth proclaiming, mine and no further. I alighted, my boots crunching on the gravel, and rested my hand upon the top plank. The wood was warm from the sun, familiar and undeniably solid. Inside the house, I opened the gun cabinet, meticulously cleaned the Remington, and slid it back into its place, not as a threat, but as a serviceable tool, now at rest. Outside, the wind carried the scent of cedar and dust. The cattle lowed somewhere beyond the rise, a subtle quietude that a man only truly hears once he has earned it. I closed the gate deliberately, allowing the latch to click definitively into place, a sound far more resonant than any gavel. And I whispered to the land, my land, it is concluded. And this gate shall remain secured until I decree otherwise. The wind rustled the grass as if in a spontaneous ovation. The ranch was unequivocally mine once more.